tens of thousands are expected to march through London next weekend calling for a ceasefire. Now, Rishi Sunak, as you just heard Catherine say, has called the plans provocative and disrespectful, warning that war memorials such as the Cenotaph could be desecrated. But the Palestine Solidarity campaign say they have no intention of marching on or near Whitehall. We'll see it when we believe it, shall we? Now, joining me is political commentator Matthew Stadlen and former Brexit Party MEP Belinda De Lucy. Now, obviously, welcome both. Thank you for joining me on a Saturday morning. I'm losing track of the day. It's a Saturday morning. Obviously, there's a march going on today, but the one that's garnering most of the headlines today is the one that is due to take place over Armistice weekend, next weekend. Now, we've heard how Rishi Sunak has described it. We have heard how Suella Braverman has described it as a hate march. I'm just going to come to you first on this one, Belinda. Do you think this march should be going ahead on that day? No. No, I don't. My blood has been running slightly cold over the last 4 weeks, witnessing what's been happening on our streets, in our stations, more no-go areas for our British Jewish community. You know, it's well known these marches are infiltrated by anti-Semites, Islamist terror sympathisers. They know this, and the frequency of them, the constant day after day, protest after protest, it's now becoming quite intimidating, and it's become more about the impact it has on the local community, on British national identity, and to choose Armistice Day to keep running their protests. I think it's hugely disrespectful, not just to all of those who sacrificed their lives, including many of our family members, uncles, grandparents, but 400 British servicemen and women have been recently killed in action in Afghanistan. There are 400 British families who've lost loved ones relatively recently, and this is a day for many of them, I presume, where they see the nation thanking their families for the sacrifice and paying homage and having reflection over those recently killed as well, and how many families will now be put off from coming to London because there is that threat of violence from these marches. If they were peaceful, why are so many wearing masks? If they were peaceful, why are pro-Israeli protests being told to stay at home because there's a pro-Palestinian one nearby and it might put their safety at risk? You know, there are so many incidences where they don't scream peaceful to me. I think it's more about intimidation and a very anti-British feeling about our values and respecting our dead and those who've sacrificed everything for us. Feelings are indeed running very high in all communities. Matthew, now the organisers of the march have made it very clear. They have said we are not going near the Cenotaph, we are not going down Whitehall. However, if you look on social media, it doesn't take long for you to find messages encouraging people to go to Whitehall, go to the Cenotaph and ruin the 2-minute silence, basically. Now, Belinda thinks this march shouldn't be taking place at all, but we have a democracy, we have a right to free speech in this country, and we have a right to protest. So what do you make of what is happening next weekend?
Yeah, I think fundamental to our democracy is the right to protest. If we do protest, we must do so peacefully and within the law. If we start banning tens of thousands of people from peacefully protesting, whatever one might think of the messages within their march, we start very quickly to become in a very dark place as a country. What other protests would we want to have banned? I'm Jewish myself. I don't actually feel there are any no-go areas in my hometown of London or in my country of Britain, but I deeply sympathise with those Jews who feel that there are. Absolutely everything needs to be done to uphold the law, and that includes clamping down very, very firmly on anti-Semitism. Let me just say this about Armistice Day. It's my freedom to respect Armistice Day. It's my freedom to honour those 2 minutes of silence. That's what I'll be doing. My grandfather on my mother's side won the Military Cross in the Second World War ahead of the D-Day landings. This matters very deeply and personally to me. It matters to tens of millions of us across the country. But that doesn't mean that other people are not free to protest peacefully on issues that they care deeply about.
So, with anti-Semitism up year on year, 1,353%, as you've just said, you are Jewish, Matthew. How do you feel when you hear phrases like from the river to the sea and jihad? I mean, what does that mean to you?
There's just no room for chants of jihad in this country, although I understand there are different interpretations of it. Most people's interpretation of the chant of jihad is holy war. So I would say that the police should clamp down very hard on that. This is being whipped up, I think, on both sides. And sadly, it's being partly whipped up by the Home Secretary. I don't think these are, by and large, hate marches. I don't think that most people, or at least I hope, that most people who chant that chant, and it is a controversial chant, from the river to the sea, think about annihilating Israel or annihilating Jews. Anyone who does issue that chant with that intent, obviously, is despicable and beneath contempt. But I don't think it is responsible politics for our Home Secretary to describe tens of thousands of people who at least claim to be marching in the name of peace as haters.
Belinda.
Yeah, I slightly take issue with that. Again, if it was, one protest organised to highlight the civilian suffering, this is almost every single day now. This is taking over our stations and our streets. How many days? Is it just now for indefinitely until they get their way? We are going to have to see our streets lined with people who admit their groups are infiltrated by haters. And the other thing I just quickly want to say, Dawn, this Remembrance Day, it's not just for British people. Thousands of Muslims and Hindus also sacrificed themselves in the fight against Nazis. Their efforts were instrumental in North Africa. It's the one day this country could come together and unite above religion and politics, and it's been taken away from us. There is a sinister agenda behind the constant, repetitive protests we are seeing, and there is intimidation. My Jewish friends are scared of going to the synagogue. I'm glad that you're not, but there are many Jewish people who do feel threatened by the constant presence of the intimidating characters, bad characters that infiltrate these
Why
protests.
do you think, you brought up, we've had the static protests at Liverpool Street Station and King's Cross, and I believe there is another one planned either for this weekend or next weekend. I couldn't quite work out which weekend it was going for the whole of Trafalgar Square, bringing that area to a standstill. I mean, how do you feel about the way police are policing these events? I mean, what they did at the stations, the protesters, was illegal. So why are the police not doing anything?
Well, the government sort of blame the police. They say, it's not up to us, it's up to the police. The police blame legislation. It's this massive circle where nothing's going to get done. And even if they do make arrests, this is not going to stop the hate. This is not going to stop the movements and the feeling and the rise of anti-Semitism. Much more needs to be done, especially in our schools and universities, where the Conservatives have overseen politicisation of our schools and universities and indoctrination of subtle anti-Semitism coming through, and anti-British values.
I want to be really clear on a couple of things. I hope I've sort of been clear enough so far, but protests have to be within the law, and that means that if they're outside the law, the police need to do their job. Of course they do. That's crucial. Secondly, the fact that I support the right of people to protest peacefully doesn't mean that I agree with everyone on that march. Obviously, I don't agree with the criminal elements on that march, or the would-be criminal elements. But also, what does Free Palestine actually mean? What would the Israeli government is, in my view, a far-right government, and in a lot of people's views. But actually, and I think they should absolutely withdraw from the West Bank, from the illegal settlements. But what does Free Palestine actually mean when you think about Gaza? Is the Israeli government supposed to strip down the protective fence, the infrastructure of defence around Gaza, when it knows that Gaza is run by a death cult that would like to do what they did on October the 7th all over again?
Have stated that they would do that again tomorrow. Unfortunately, we have to move on from this debate now. So thank you very much, Matthew Stadlen and Belinda De Lucy.